It's always funny how contestants think they have created a masterpiece of a dish when in reality, it's far from it. I'm talking about dishes that are visually unappetizing and taste even worse. And who better to start with than Angel? I mean, she just couldn't get the hang of French cuisine. Honestly, for someone aiming to be a top chef, it's a real blow.
Let me just get through this because I really don't want to go home.
If you ask me, Angel's lack of confidence was obvious. And to be fair, her nervousness was totally justified.
Where's the tart?
Back there.
Yeah, that we can agree with. I mean, you had 60 minutes to whip up something decent, and you couldn't even do that. Graham couldn't let the awkward moment go and kept probing, trying to find out what exactly Angel had presented. Poor Angel was so flustered that she could barely stutter out a coherent answer, making the situation even more uncomfortable.
All right, Angel.
Okay.
Yeah, where is the tart, Angel? 'Cause I believe that's what you wanted to present, right? Believe me, Chef Ramsay was really taken aback when he discovered the tart was missing. Apparently, Angel had left it back at her table because she felt it didn't measure up to her expectations. This left Chef Ramsay in a fix, as the main component of the dish was nowhere to be found. Graham, watching the situation unfold, had no choice but to make a remark about the unfortunate turn of events.
I'm more embarrassed for you because I think deep down inside you can do.
And the next thing you know, it was Ramsay's turn to try the dish. He was all set to take a bite, but just as he was about to, Angel blurted out something she really shouldn't have.
Next up.
Honestly, I think that move was a total disaster. I mean, why not just trust the judges to handle it instead of jumping in and messing things up? And let me tell you, what Chef Ramsay said next was beyond brutal. It was downright ruthless.
Christine, let's go.
So here's the deal. Chef Ramsay actually felt sorry for Angel because he knew she had so much potential. I mean, the man was totally convinced that she had a lot more to offer.
And a creamy Dijon sauce.
But Angel's fate was pretty much sealed. As the day drew to a close, it was clear that Angel's journey in the MasterChef kitchen had come to an end.
That I had made it this far in America.
But our next pick from Season 3's run was even worse. Episode 10 featured a challenge meant to really test culinary skills. It was designed to test who could handle the heat in the kitchen and who couldn't. Let's just say they definitely sorted out the pros from the amateurs with that one. And guess what the challenge was about?
Wow.
A pizza stone, meaning the challenge for the night was clear: to make an amazing dish using the pizza stone. Enter Mike, who was feeling all over the place.
Wrapping the pizza and cooking lobster.
Wow.
As for his plan, it was something the judges were doubtful of.
Start it in a little bit of water and then throw it in there with a little garlic and butter and then cure it.
As he proudly displayed his creation to the judges, hoping for admiration and praise, their reactions were far from what he expected.
You were given to cook with?
But that's when Mike blurted out something that was sure to land him in trouble. Yeah, this was kind of becoming a bit of a pattern, huh?
Remember my dough ratios for pizza because I would have done a pizza.
Graham's comment about Mike's dish made it seem like he had somehow managed to turn the pizza into something completely dried out. Seriously, just picture a pizza so dry, it's practically turning into a cracker. It sounded like Graham was being polite, but he might as well have just told Mike to gather his stuff and hit the road.
It's like you found a way to make it dehydrated.
But Mike, he was really determined to make his case. He kept trying to explain why he forgot, but Chef Ramsay just wouldn't buy it.
You didn't remember?
Mike's excuses didn't stand a chance in the room. They were practically dismissed with laughter. Then Mike finally confessed that he had completely zoned out while cooking. Seriously, how does someone just black out like that? But of course, the judges weren't buying it. Just one glance at Joe's expression told the whole story. As for his chances of staying in the game, by that point, Mike must have realized there was zero chance he'd make it to the next round.
Hope there's not a blank space at your cooking station tomorrow.
And just like you'd expect, by the end of the tasting, Mike had kind of accepted his fate.
Hell yeah, I'm nervous. Good job, Becky.
He must have been secretly hoping that someone, anyone, would mess up worse than him. I mean, who wouldn't? But when it came down to it, there wasn't one other person out there who could manage to destroy the pizza like he did. Trust me, I've seen my fair share of kitchen disasters, but that one really took the cake. And when all was said and done, it was glaringly obvious Mike's experiment with that fancy pizza stone just didn't pan out. The judges had no choice but to show him the door that very night.
You keep that food dream burning high.
However, not everyone was thrilled with this choice. While many thought Becky's attitude was the worst, there were others who argued that David should have been the one to go. I mean, his dish ended up in the trash. But hey, let's not overlook Tally's flour mishap either. That was a real disaster. Alright, here's what I think about it. Sure, Mike might not have been the standout cook of the season, but I believe he should have gotten another chance. There's this sense that he had more potential that didn't quite shine through with that dry pizza. And when you consider some of the absolute disasters that others presented and somehow got away, a dry pizza doesn't seem all that bad in comparison. So overall, it really does seem pretty unfair. But let's move our focus to the next pick, shall we? During the dessert-focused elimination round, where coffee was the star ingredient, Max entered the scene. Full of enthusiasm, he scurried through the pantry shelves, gathering everything he needed for what he believed would be his defining moment. With a sense of pride and excitement, Max proudly presented his creation, a towering stack composed of 15 delicate crepes. However, as he stood there, brimming with anticipation, the judges' faces betrayed confusion rather than awe. They struggled to grasp Max's vision, which seemed more like a wild experiment than a carefully crafted dessert masterpiece.
The hell is that?
Now, Chef Ramsay was totally confused, scratching his head trying to make sense of what was in front of him. Meanwhile, Max took a shot at explaining the layers to get a clearer picture. He mentioned cream cheese, mascarpone, espresso, cream, and a touch of sugar. Yet, his ambitious creation crumbled the moment the judges tasted it.
It's like I've just gone to the doctors for a skin graft on my butt.
I mean, embarrassing doesn't even cover it.
Horrible, weird texture.
And then there was Graham, who was having a hard time trying to keep his laughter under control.
There's no sweetness.
Overall, the judges were all on the same page. Max's dessert just didn't hit the mark in terms of sweetness. Despite its supposed layers, it lacked that essential coffee kick or any sort of desirable flavor.
Much of anything aside from the weird texture, I would be worried, actually, with what you made here.
But despite the horrible dish he made, guess what? He didn't get the boot. This stirred up yet another debate. Fans started to argue that Max only stuck around on the show for the sake of ratings. The guy clearly had one of the worst attitudes and couldn't even whip up a decent dish. The only thing he excelled at, it was creating drama. Personally speaking, I'm still mad he got to stay and Alvin got eliminated. Pretty damn unfair. And just when you think there couldn't be dishes that are worse than Max, along comes Matt from season 11. I mean, what this dude did was every chef's worst nightmare. Imagine this. Matt looked at the clock, only 20 minutes left, and he suddenly realized his steak was totally overdone. At this point, there's no turning back on that grill. This meant he was stuck with only one option.
Not good.
So let me rewind the episode for you. One thing about the challenge was clear, the contestants were working with beef. But they didn't expect a celebrity chef to make an appearance on the show.
The legendary Michael Mina.
With Michael Mina in the house, you can imagine the pressure. But here's the shocker.
Won't know what cut you're cooking.
The contestants were completely in the dark about which cut of beef they'd be working with until they finally unveiled their mystery boxes. To make things more exciting, Chef Ramsay and Michael really got involved. They stepped right up to the plate, quite literally, and decided to give the chefs a first-hand cooking demonstration. This wasn't just about showing off their skills, it was all about inspiring the contestants with new techniques and ideas to tackle the challenge ahead.
Now, chef, tell me what's your dish.
I am doing a Wagyu ribeye.
As soon as the contestants lifted up their mystery boxes, Aaron had another surprise planned for them.
Dinner for two in his Michelin-starred restaurant, Michael Mina.
Now, how exciting is that? So, Matt, with his trusty fillet in hand, was really feeling the heat. Everyone was expecting him to nail it perfectly. But with less than 20 minutes left on the clock, there was no way things were gonna go according to the plan.
Overcooked this one.
Overcooked, huh? That's no good. So, what was his next step?
Now I gotta start over.
When the judges came over to check on his dish, Matt wasn't feeling very confident.
I'm a little disappointed. I feel like I got thrown a softball here and I missed.
Alright, so picture this. The judges gathered around, all serious, ready to dish out their verdict on who nailed the beef challenge and who might be heading for the chopping block. But hold up, let me backtrack a bit and fill you in on what went down when Matt strutted up with his filet mignon. Picture a perfectly seared steak swimming in a rich porcini vermouth pan sauce. And what was on the side? Crispy Brussels sprouts and creamy garlic mashed potatoes that were just begging to be devoured. And now, for the moment of truth.
Big difference between searing and scorching.
How should it be cooked?
He especially disappointed the guest judge, Michael Mina.
Just really looking for just simple perfection, right?
And when I say disappointed, I mean it. Despite the critique from Ramsay, he did acknowledge that Matt's seasoning was pretty good, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough to save him from elimination. It was quite surprising that seasoning didn't turn out to be the deciding factor in this instance. Nevertheless, Matt left feeling disappointed in himself, yet determined not to let this setback define his culinary journey.
Hi, Matt.
But there exists a dish that has earned itself a notorious reputation as perhaps the worst ever served in the history of the show. Quite the recognition, isn't it? And who is the mastermind behind this infamous creation? None other than Big Willie himself. This unforgettable culinary mishap unfolded during a particularly challenging episode in Season 5, where our esteemed participant Willie regrettably failed to showcase his usual culinary prowess. The task at hand was to prepare a dish known as a carmelini. Now, if this term doesn't ring a bell for you, rest assured, Willie was equally unaware of its specifics.
We don't have fancy Italian restaurants, at least not where I've been.
Imagine yourself in a situation where you're tasked with preparing a dish completely unfamiliar to you. Instead of remaining passive, Big Willie springs into action, fueled by a stroke of inspiration. He decides to diverge completely from the strategies adopted by his fellow contestants, embarking on what can only be described as a unique culinary journey. While others meticulously stick to their well-thought-out game plans, he embraces spontaneity, trusting in his instincts, and hoping for the best possible outcome. When he eventually engaged in conversation with Graham, the encounter took an intriguing turn. Graham's reaction was something you need to watch, and spoiler alert, it wasn't a good one.
I'm doing a dessert carmelini.
No.
Yes.
Now, I don't know about you, but it seems like he was not exactly sure of what he was doing himself. Everything that said, it just seemed like he was saying that more to convince himself than the judges. And watching him fumble around the ingredient was even more hard to watch. Like, this was not a hard challenge. It shouldn't be so nerve-wracking, but the way he was dealing with things, he was just making it worse. One can only hope he figures it out before time runs out. But that's when he went on to explain his plan to Graham.
Apple filling.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna make a creme anglaise.
I know it's good to be innovative, but there is a limit. And by the looks of it, you could tell he was either taking a big gamble or had some crazy cool idea brewing in his head. Who knows, it might just totally work out, or it could completely crash and burn. So, which way do you think this dish is gonna go? Because, you know what? Graham was concerned.
That's just crazy town.
You know, go big or go home.
Big Willie thought it was all about going big or just heading home, and honestly, this time, he might actually end up being the one who heads home early. According to him, if you're not going big, there's no point in sticking around, you know?
Go home though,
I don't
right?
want to go home.
You know that we're judging you on the caramelli.
Graham went over the rules with Big Willie once more, making sure he understood how the judges would judge the contestants based on their dish presentation. He stressed how crucial it was to stick to the guidelines and recreate the dish as accurately as they could. However, Willie seemed a bit lost in understanding despite Graham's clear explanations. His face showed a blend of confusion and determination, as if he was still trying to wrap his head around everything.
Well, at least you can live with that then.
Yep.
Graham obviously wasn't sold on his idea, but he did what he could to help. Then came the moment when Big Willie had to present his dish to the judges. And here's how it played out.
With a creme anglaise sauce.
After seeing what he had made, Chef Ramsay couldn't help but point one thing out.
I was eating daily, something I want to see in one of my restaurants, and so
Willie seemed to have completely disregarded the memo, failing to grasp the crucial points Joe had emphasized about the challenge. It was as if he was operating in his own bubble, perhaps overly confident in his own methods, or simply unaware of the specific instructions. This time around, his disregard for the details would have serious consequences. As tensions mounted, Chef Ramsay, after observing Willie's disconnected approach, finally posed the burning question that had been lingering in everyone's thoughts since the beginning of the challenge.
It just came to me.
I'm sorry, what? I mean, you couldn't come up with a creative dish, but you could have at least come up with a creative excuse. And obviously, Chef Ramsay was pretty upset with his response.
Francis here with the tricks, Daniel's confused, and you're just all over the shop.
Yikes! And there was no stopping him.
I see this dish and
Wow, that comment? It's gonna haunt him for ages, seriously. Getting roasted like that, especially by a big shot chef? And just when he thought he'd survived the worst of it, Chef Ramsay went in for round 2. Like, come on, can it get any more embarrassing? It's the kind of thing that's gonna replay in his head every time he steps near a kitchen from now on.
dog vomit. Oh, it's just unappetizing.
Getting hit with that kind of criticism about your cooking? It's like taking a direct shot to the ego. You put your heart and soul into making something delicious, and then bam, someone's like, nah, not my thing. It's enough to make you question every seasoning, every technique you thought was spot on. You start second-guessing yourself, wondering if you've totally missed the mark in the kitchen. It's that kind of feedback that really gets under your skin, you know? Like, are you even cut out for this chef life? It messes with your head big time. As for the taste, it was just as bad as the visuals.
Excuse me.
Well, I can't really blame him. I mean, can you imagine anything more heartbreaking for a chef? But the feedback didn't stop there. Ramsay just couldn't seem to hold back his frustration.
I love you when you cook humble.
His words did make a lot of sense. I mean, it's not always the best idea to stand out. Sometimes blending is better. I mean, it's better than pulling moves that would land you in trouble. If you ask me, Chef Ramsay's anger was justified.
Given the best of ingredients and a chance to just show some technical ability.
As for Willie, he was devastated to hear all the criticism coming his way.
My dish sucked.
That did not work.
But despite everything, he was saved from elimination. I guess luck was on his side. However, not everyone shares the same luck. Take this contestant from season 7, for instance, who completely bombed when trying to recreate Chef Ramsay's iconic dish.
Dreading tasting it because it sounds disgusting.
Episode 6 started with another Gordon Ramsay masterclass.
Gently prise out that claw.
The top 16 contestants had to kill, poach, and shell a lobster from scratch. A pretty tall order for a bunch of home cooks.
Brush. It gives it a nice sheen.
However, even though they weren't familiar with it, the contestants jumped right in and tried to copy Chef Ramsay's skills. And guess what? They only had 25 minutes to pull it off. With such a tight deadline, everyone hurried to get started and ensure the lobster looked exactly like Chef Ramsay's. And yes, they were careful not to mess up any of that precious meat while they worked.
Had what it takes to do this.
Following Chef Ramsay's example was just the start. But what came next depended entirely on how well each contestant could actually pull it off. Interestingly, it wasn't your typical top 3, bottom 3 scenario. It boiled down to one simple thing. Either you met Chef Ramsay's high standards, or you didn't. And if they fell short, well, you can probably guess their fate. But staying true to the theme, I do want to shine a spotlight on 3 chefs who really stood out before we got to the elimination round. And first up is...
I'm gonna fight for it.
I'm disappointed in myself.
Andrea totally blanked on the technique Chef Ramsay taught her and ended up attempting to snip off the tail with scissors, which, as you can imagine, didn't quite go according to plan. Meanwhile, Nathan was dealing with his own set of issues.
But I freaked out on this claw and didn't get it out.
And hey, we can't overlook Diamond, who's a vegetarian, but had to really push past a strong aversion just to get that lobster onto the plate in the first place.
And you were not comfortable taking all that meat out of the lobster. That was pretty obvious.
But surprisingly enough, out of the 3, only Diamond was safe.
You are safe because you're doing a great job.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
But when it came to the elimination challenge, mastering Chef Ramsay's iconic lobster tortellini proved to be an incredibly tough task. Chef Ramsay showed them how it's done, but a few contestants decided to do things their own way. Lisa Ann, who had been having a rough time leading up to this point, hit a new low with her performance. Right from the start, she set the stage for disaster by putting all her energy into perfecting the broth while neglecting the pasta, which was a recipe for disaster. Every move she made seemed to backfire, including her decision to add alcohol, despite Chef Ramsay's clear advice to focus on anything but that. In the end, Lisa Ann's lobster tortellini turned out to be a far cry from the flawless dish she had hoped for.
And look, it's got no top on it.
But guess what's the worst part?
Very salty. It's like eating a mouthful of anchovies.
Yeah, it was unbelievable how she choked on the salty broth right after Chef Ramsay asked her to taste it. It's pretty sad, you know. You'd think she would have tried the dish before presenting it to the judges. But her attitude made it even worse. She totally snapped at Chef Ramsay as soon as she felt like she was being backed into a corner.
I'm not convinced.
I worked really hard to get here.
Seeing everything, Chef Ramsay had only one thing to say.
With excuses.
And after a disastrous performance, it shouldn't come as a surprise when Liza Ann was shown the door.
Please, take off your apron and place it on your belly.
And despite all the encouragement she got from Chef Ramsay, she left the kitchen defeated and bitter.
But this has just been...
Well, if you ask me, I think Ryan Umane from Season 3 was hands down the most disliked contestant of the season. Right from his bragging and arrogance, this dude was even known to make some of the female contestants uncomfortable with his sleazy remarks.
I wouldn't want to have to take orders from a guy like that.
To begin with, Ryan introduced himself to the judges as the flavor elevator. He claimed that he spent thousands of dollars at fancy restaurants on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Wondering why? Apparently, he realized that he could cook the same food at home all by himself, but better.
And I could do this on my own. And not only can I do this at home, I could do it better than they're doing it.
You see the cocky behavior dripping right from the get-go, don't you? Well, not just that. Ryan quite occasionally mentioned how he believed himself to be one of the best cooks among all the other home cooks from that season. But despite all that confidence, Ryan was eliminated quite early on, landing in the 14th place in the competition. Now, Ryan was a jerk pretty much throughout his entire time on the show, but if I had to pick one episode, I go with this incident in particular. I'm talking about the one where Ryan's arrogance backfired during the first Mystery Box Challenge. So, Ryan was the first to be called to the front for the top 3 position, and this is what Ryan had to say.
I'm really not surprised that my plate is one of the top dishes. These other cooks are gonna have to step up their game if they're gonna want to compete with me.
Oh yeah, the dude was so sure of himself. But he should have waited a little bit before celebrating his win, because guess what happened next?
You managed to cook what we think are the worst 3 dishes of this mystery box challenge.
Serves him right for all his self-righteousness. Next up, in the military challenge, Ryan showed up with his holier-than-thou attitude as usual, but it didn't end there. Even though Ryan was on the winning team's side, he managed to douche it up by telling the ladies to showcase themselves a little bit more for some votes. Jeez, Ryan, do you have any dignity in you, man?
Never there was a time to flash a nip, ladies.
Dude, shut up.
Well, since I've already established Ryan Umane's arrogant and misogynistic side, let's take a deep dive into his self-proclaimed attitude. In episode 6, Chef Ramsay managed to get away with pulling Ryan's leg. However, his narcissistic nature simply couldn't make heads or tails of it.
I'm gonna win the whole competition.
Top 10,
I'm gonna win the whole thing.
top 5,
I'm taking home the title, Chef.
top 3.
I'm gonna go home with the check, the cookbook, and the title.
Even though Ryan every now and then turned up to the occasion and presented a beautifully done dish, you gotta catch a glimpse of Ryan's sadistic side too. Like this moment right here.
Time to throw some people under the bus here, right?
Ryan had the chance to choose a protein of his choice for his fellow contestants, and would you believe it, he was so sadistic. He chose to hand Christina Ha, the home cook who was blind, a live crab to cook with. What's more, he even had this smirk plastered all the while.
Got it.
But look who won the season. Christine managed to show him his place by simply being herself, and I'm sure her win stung real bad.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
So that's a wrap on today's video, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on my post notifications. And if you thought this video was crazy, then make sure to check out the next video right here, it's even better.